Hello everyone, welcome to the March online chapter meeting for the Building Designers Association of Australia. My name is Jennifer Binns, I'm a building designer based in Tasmania, and I am joined today by Sarah Jane, managing technology in the background. Post us a message in the chat box and let us know where you're logging in from. And thank you everyone for joining us. We have a full event schedule in March, so we invite you to attend and participate in what is of interest to you. There's a few events coming up in the next 2 weeks. Sarah Jane will post some links in the chat box and I'll just give you a quick rundown. Tomorrow, Daniel Webber will discuss the fundamentals of PI insurance. If you're in the ACT chapter is attending Winning Appliances and will be joined by Zach Kerr from Steve Eltron. He will be showcasing their range of HRV systems, which will be of particular interest to anybody looking at options for fresh air ventilation and passive house design standards. On the 9th of March, there is also an opportunity to learn about specification writing. So check out the website at bdaa.com.au/events to see what is lined up. And it's great to see people putting in their location in the chat box. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started with today's presentations, just a quick rundown of the Zoom tools. We are welcome to ask questions throughout the meeting using the Q&A box, and our presenters will answer the questions either throughout the presentation or at the end. If you'd like to ask a question via audio, there's a raise your hand tool, and we just ask that you check there's no background noise that will interfere with the audio when we unmute you to ask your question. The chat box is there as a continuous message thread, and SJ will also post links in the chat box. So our first presentation today is from April Muirden and David Craven. April is the manager for Scorecard in the Energy Demand and Efficiency branch of the Victorian Government, and David is the Senior Project Officer. The Residential Efficiency Scorecard is a program that supplies an Energy Star rating for a home, and today April and David are going to take you through a review of the program. The star rating provides an easy to understand snapshot of how a home uses energy and is sustained through Australia's hot and cold weather. So it should be reviewed and understood by every building designer and thermal assessor. If you're interested in hearing and learning more about the National Scorecard, April and David will be holding a 1-hour more detailed presentation on the 16th of March at 10 a.m. The presentation is free and will provide you with a formal CPD point. Sarah Jane will put the link in the chat box now, I think, if you want to register to attend. So have I got you online, April and David?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm going to hand over to you.
Great. I'm just going to figure out how to share my screens. I've got multiple screens running, so hand over. I'll just click on this and we'll see if it's working as it should be. Now, can you see my screen?
Look.
Oh, hang on. I just got to click this button. Can you see my screen
Yes.
with the PowerPoint? Yeah.
Yes.
Does it look like it's in presentation mode at the moment? Or
no, we've still got the thumbnails down.
Sorry, I'm putting it into presentation mode now, hopefully. Apologise for this. Okay, is that better?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing quickly and try and reshare. Let's have a look at this. Oh no, I think I actually want to share one. Does that look better?
That looks better.
You're actually seeing
and
presentation mode now?
Got a little preview of the following slide.
Oh, no, that's not right either. I really apologise for this, but
that's all right.
Okay, I think actually, here's this one. Let's try now.
That's got it.
That's got it? Yep. Okay.
Lovely.
All right, apologies to everybody. Yep, thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Firstly, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting today and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. So, and thank you to the BDAA for the opportunity to talk with you all today about Scorecard. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll try and get through a bit. And these are some of the things we're going to cover. We'll just quickly look at the background for why Scorecard was developed, a little bit about the program, what's in Scorecard, look at the certificate. We'll talk a little bit about our national field trial that we've got underway, at the moment, and also how the market for scorecard is starting to grow, and how you can get involved. And also, as Jennifer said, acknowledge my colleague April Muden, who's here with us today as well. And if we've got time for a few questions at the end, April will, I'm sure, come online at that point and help with some of those as well. So getting into it, let's just talk a little bit about the background. Of course, we all understand that existing homes are often poorly performing. They're often uncomfortable in both hot and cold weather, receive high energy bills and produce high levels of carbon emissions. But we also know that there's no one silver bullet solution for solving these issues. Solutions are complex, and consumers are often unclear on what they need to do to be able to take action. And what we also know from the research literature is that people really need and respect trusted ratings and the ability to compare apples and apples in order to be able to take action. Otherwise, we know that they either may not upgrade at all, or if they do, they may not be prepared to pay as much for both the advice that they're getting in terms of the upgrades and for the upgrades themselves. And we know that there's a real adverse impact from a lack of taking action in this area, both at a household level, in terms of the cost to individuals to run their homes and the comfort that they experience while they're in them, but that can also flow through to significant health impacts, and also, you know, the individual carbon footprint that we all have. But that then flows through also to a community level, of course. Means higher overall energy costs within the community. We're placing unnecessary stress on our electricity grids, for example, due to air conditioners coming on in peak times in summer, increasing the risk of blackouts and so on, but also, you know, contributing to, again, our carbon footprint as a society more broadly, and impacting our overall societal health budget. And so this is a large problem, as almost all homes in Australia are affected by this in some way or another. So about Scorecard. Scorecard was developed by the Victorian government in 2017. We've now conducted over 4,200 assessments of homes, both here within Victoria and around Australia. We have 65 currently accredited assessors, both in Victoria and nationally. And we've done a few reviews along the way of our work to date. We did a national pilot. We did a national pilot in 2019, and also did a review of the first 2 years of data that had come out of the program a little while ago as well. And we currently have now a national scorecard field trial running, which I'll talk a little bit about more in the future as we get into the presentation further. So Scorecard is a whole of home house energy rating program for both new and existing homes. It's similar to getting a star rating for one of your major appliances, like a fridge, but it's delivered by a body of accredited assessors who operate under strict quality controls, and provides the scorecard assessment provides the householder that's undertaken the assessment with tailored advice on how to reduce their energy costs and improve the comfort of their home. And as well as focusing on the thermal shell of the building, it's also key to Scorecard is that it focuses on the major fixed assets of the property that have a significant impact to the running costs of the home, but are also hard to improve and costly to improve. And it's really a key area where people need good advice when they're making those kinds of decisions. So in terms of Scorecard, what's included in the rating? Well, as I said, it is obviously the thermal shell of the building, but it also includes a whole range of other things, such as the hot water system, the heating and cooling, the use of hot water through the showers. If a property has a pool or a spa, it includes that. It also includes the renewable energy generation through PVs, if the property has that as well. So it really is a whole of home rating, and its cost, the star rating itself is based on the cost to run the home. So that's an important metric that we focused on, because that's what we found to be of most importance to most people that we were looking to influence. Also, we use an average of user behaviour. So this is really so we can get comparability across assessments, rather than focusing in on the way particular individuals operate their home. We wanted to be able to rate how the house performs under average operating conditions. In terms of the certificate itself, you can see here what the output of a scorecard assessment looks like. So you get, this is the first page of the certificate where you get the overall star rating. And as I mentioned before, that star rating is based on the cost to run the fixed appliances in the house. And our rating system, or our rating band, our star bands, are set up so that 3 stars represents average performance of housing in Australia. 9-star rating would represent a 0 cost home to run, and 10 stars is actually energy positive. In addition to the overall star rating, you can see that you get both a hot and cold weather rating to look at how comfortable a house is and how expensive it will be to keep comfortable, both in winter or in a cooler climate, and also in summer or in a hotter climate. So you also get that kind of differentiation. Plus, at the bottom of the first page of the certificate, you can see the rating that the home achieves, both with PV, if it does have a PV system, but also to understand, what the effects are or how the home is performing without the impact of the PV. You can also see what the star rating is without the PV as well. And then on the reverse side of the certificate, it breaks it down further and looks at the performance of the various fixed appliances within the house, so the heating, the cooling, the lighting, and so on. And you get a sense of how well each of those elements are contributing to the rating. And also there's a series of suggested improvement options that the assessor can talk through the householder with to offer advice as to how they can improve that rating should they wish to do that. As I mentioned, when we as we progressed through the program, we have done some assessments along the way. A little while ago, we did a review of the a series of assessments within Victoria. We focused on a data set that was mainly made up of low-income houses, and I just thought I'd show you a couple of statistics that we found from that. We don't have time today to go through the entire analysis, but what we found, of course, in Victoria was that where energy was being used most in the home was primarily for heating and for hot water, and between those two things, they occupied almost 90% of the heating load, of the energy load. We also found that many of the homes, 85% of the homes, in fact, received the lowest possible rating for hot weather performance, but as well, many of the homes also received a very low rating for cold weather performance. So our housing stock, at least within this data set, was not terribly well performing, and that's really representative of what we see across the country with our existing housing stock in general. We also, in 2019, expanded our focus to a national pilot by bringing in a number of assessors in jurisdictions outside of Victoria who conducted a range of assessments for us to really trial how the accreditation process and how the tool worked in other states, in other climate zones. And to that end, we also undertook a study specifically focused on how the tool performed in tropical locations across Darwin, Cairns, and Broome. And again, just a snapshot, but in doing that, one of the things we looked at was what the motivation was for people to both to act, to actually put in place or to undertake some of the recommended actions that were coming out of their scorecard assessment, but also looking at why it was that they might not choose to act. And interestingly, of course, in terms of their motivation, we found that certainly the biggest motivator was people actually having good knowledge and being well motivated. But then the next most important thing was that, if something was easy to do and it was relatively low cost, then people were going to jump in and do that as well. And then, as you can see, the motivation drops down across a whole range of other factors from there. In terms of motivation not to act, well, again, not surprisingly, you can see there's a range of reasons why people may not choose to act. The fact is they may simply not have the money to undertake the improvements that are being necessary to improve the comfort of their home. They may be thinking about selling their home in the near future, and so don't want to invest at this point because there's no real driver for them to do that. They may simply be comfortable with the status quo of how their home is currently operating and have a low motivation, or in some cases people are renting and don't have the capacity to make those changes on behalf of the landlord. I'll just move on briefly now to tell you a little bit about the national field trial that's currently underway. We're currently doing the field trial, looking at rolling out a national scorecard tool. So we've integrated the previously existing tropical scorecard tool into the other main scorecard tool. So we have one scorecard tool that's operating now. We've just about finished adding in all of the climate zones into that tool. So there'll be one tool that will cover the whole of the country. And the intention is that this will roll out nationally from the middle of this year. So the field trial is essentially to test a number of parameters ahead of that national rollout. We're looking at really what the interest is from the assessor community across Australia in the tool. We're also testing the tool itself, how it performs across all of those climate zones. We're testing our processes such as online assessor training, our online examination processes, and so on. And we're also starting to push out a range of marketing materials in the form of fact sheets and other things that are relevant across the whole of the country, and we're testing the uptake of those. So really for us, this is an opportunity to look at how the scorecard performs across all of those parameters across the country, because really we're coming up to a key decision point at this point where we're working with our jurisdictional colleagues to support the rollout of the national tool. So this is a crunch decision time to really determine, is now the right time for the national rollout of scorecard. And we're doing the field trial. We're using a number of things. We've added in 25 additional assessors that are being currently accredited across all states and territories, and they'll be doing a range of assessments in a range of locations and climate zones for us. So that'll help us to test not only the veracity of the tool in those locations, but also the process that they've been through in terms of accreditation and so on. We're not paying those assessors at this point. We're providing them with training and accreditation, but this will actually help us to understand, what the real uptake and interest in the tool is. The assessors are assessing homes in each state and territory, and then we'll get feedback from them. That they'll do a short survey after each assessment they do, and they'll also be encouraging the householders that they're working with to also complete a survey. So we're going to get some really good feedback about how the processes and the technical capacity of the tool has gone in each of those rating situations, and that will help us really to form an evaluation of the national scorecard overall. By May later this year, we'll be reporting the outcome of this field trial to all of our jurisdictional colleagues in the various states and territories in support of the proposed rollout, which will hopefully be happening from the middle of the year. As I mentioned, we've, in terms of the market for scorecard, the level of interest continues to grow, and from a range of sectors, and we've developed a range of collateral to support various sectors in the uptake of the tool. It's obviously voluntary, and so anything we can do to help sectors utilise the tool, that will help with the expansion, the rollout of and uptake of the tool. So here you just see some examples of work we've done with the real estate sector and how scorecard ratings can be incorporated into their collateral when selling or leasing homes. And I think interestingly as well, we're also seeing an increase now of uptake in the finance sector. So, for example, Bank Australia has for a little while now been offering 3 types of clean energy home loans for energy efficient houses, and for those, in a number of cases, scorecard is used as the measurement for compliance with those home loans, although traditionally that's largely been in Victoria, but now with scorecard rolling out nationally, I know that Bank Australia are keen to utilise scorecard to demonstrate compliance for those loans at a national level as well. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, apart from to say, if you're interested in learning more about Scorecard, I'd encourage you to attend the BDAA Scorecard CPD session, which I know is scheduled for the 16th of March. I believe quite a few of you have already signed up for that, but that will give an opportunity for a more deep dive session into actually seeing how the tool functions and getting a bit more of an understanding of the technical side of the tool. So I encourage you to join that session, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, if you're keen to just understand more about the program and the tool itself, then get along to our website. You can see the address there, and these slides will be distributed later. So you'll be able to find that, I'm sure, but there you'll be able to find out a whole lot more about the program. But also, if you've got a particular interest in becoming involved, there's an opportunity there for you to understand what the process is to becoming an accredited scorecard assessor, and even to start that process and you know, create a profile in our portal and express your interest in becoming a part of the program. So thank you for your time today. That's the end of the presentation. We've now got an opportunity for a few questions. Now, I'm just having a look to see, do we have questions at this stage? I might stop sharing my screen, and that might help us to do that. Just go over here. Okay. All right, so if we're looking, okay, I can
see those questions, David?
I can see some things popping up. Just let me have a look into the chat.
Are
they mainly the chat or Q&A?
They're in the Q&A box. Would you like me to read some of them out?
Sure. And April, are you around?
Yes.
Yes, you're there too. Okay, great.
I'll hand over to you, April.
I'm attempting to busily answer the questions in the Q&A.
I think it might be interesting if some of them can be answered.
Sure.
By you both, and everyone can hear.
Yeah. So April, maybe we'll talk. I mean, there's inevitably there's questions about basics and NatHERS. So one of the questions is this an addition to basics / NatHERS assessments?
Okay. Hi everyone, it's April Muirden here. Hopefully, yep, my camera seems to be working.
Yeah, we can see you there.
So many different screens at once. Okay, so to be clear, you're probably thinking about the use of basics and NatHERS as a compliance mechanism under the Building Code of Australia. So for new homes, being basics is the required assessment in New South Wales, and NatHERS is often used in other jurisdictions and in New South Wales. The scorecard is not a pathway to attain Building Code of Australia compliance. It's not an approved tool. It is not a mandatory tool. It is purely voluntary. Those who are interested may have many questions based on that. Some of the common questions are, so how does this work with a NatHERS thermal performance assessment? If you want to find out, you can read our technical document. We have correlated to NatHERS, so they speak to each other in summary. The next question is, will this become a mandatory assessment under NatHERS that we usually get? So all jurisdictions have agreed that scorecard would best fit in the NatHERS family as a voluntary tool initially. And we're in process of doing that. That may take some time, but yes, them all fitting together under the same umbrella group would be sensible. And, you know, mandation could be considered by jurisdictions at a later date, but I think probably everyone online would go, you don't usually jump into mandation without letting the tool speak for itself. So I think we're at the stage of the tool speaking for itself.
Thanks, April. There's a couple of questions about the field trial, which I'll answer just very quickly. Is there a possibility for assessors to become paid in the future? Yes, of course. And just to clarify what I said in the presentation, we're not actually paying the assessors to do those assessments as part of the field trial, but they're more If they're able to strike, commercial arrangements with people to do those assessments, then of course, they will be paid for that. And assessors, there's already an established market in Victoria of scorecard assessors who are doing exactly that. Obviously, outside of Victoria, the market is less mature, and so we don't necessarily anticipate that the assessors that are doing the field trial will be paid for all of the assessments they do, but they've joined the field trial understanding that, and I guess really getting in on the ground floor of the national rollout of the tool is a benefit to them. And the other part of that was how many houses outside of Victoria will be in the current trial. And so really what we've done is we've taken on an average of about 3 or 4 new assessors per jurisdiction, and we're asking each of those to do a minimum of 5 assessments. Some of them will hopefully do more, but so we're hoping to have in the order of 15 or 20 accredited assessments as part of the field trial in each jurisdiction. In some we'll have more than that because we've got a larger number of assessors. I feel like we might be just about out of time. Jennifer, how are we going?
I think that's okay. There's quite a few questions. So if you're happy to keep going for a few minutes.
Sure, okay.
I think if we just give it another 5 minutes, and then maybe I'll just, if you're available, get you to stay online and people can keep asking questions through the Q&A box.
Okay. Looking for ones that we've talked about, the difference between scorecard and basics. How can the assessment be comparable if owners, tenants pay different prices for electricity and gas? You ever thought about that, April?
Yep. Okay. So as we would all know, it's incredibly important that rating systems are objective and comparable. So one of the things we do in the scorecard is say one of our KPIs is that 2 assessors should walk into the same house and get the same rating. It shouldn't vary depending on behaviour of the householder, because we know it would be very easy to accidentally or indeed deliberately scam a rating by claiming certain behaviours. And that works the same for energy pricing. So obviously energy pricing is a behavioural activity, i.e. which energy supply you choose is your choice, and you can choose to change that. And ultimately, that's not a very helpful metric for someone who's wondering whether their hot water system is efficient or not. So what we do to solve that is there is a standard average for each jurisdiction which represents all the fuel types. So we cover all fuel types. That includes LPG and wood, for example, because Tasmania, for example, is a very heavily wood using jurisdiction. So they all have an average rather than a specific for that house, which allows anyone to compare any house with any other house without worrying whether that was a choice of the householder. And that goes broadly across the entire way this tool operates. I might try and cover off, I think there was a buried question on insulation, and I don't want to skip over things. I think it was earlier on. How do you verify what specific insulation has been used in existing building, which is a very good question. That goes, of course, more broadly. Evidently for new homes, you have full specs available. For existing homes, you don't. It's a categorical difference. And a key thing that has to be managed for a scheme was wants 2 people to walk into the same house and get the same rating. So any of you who are involved in scorecard would realise we have a rigorous accreditation and training process and rigorous rules so that people know what they should do. So for insulation, in some generally, you may be able to prove what insulation is in there, and if so, that's acceptable evidence. For example, showing the specs of a renovation where insulation has been installed. Otherwise, we assume the worst case scenario for the regulations of that date, which in many cases means no insulation. That is not something that can be changed by the assessor without proving evidence. Otherwise, we'd be open to a scam where people would claim all sorts of things on subjective data. So we work on objective data and default worst case scenario for that situation. So do we verify in the way some jurisdictions do by drilling holes in walls? No, we don't do that, because that is not a mature sector in Australia, i.e. there is no standard process for drilling holes in walls and checking what the actual correct insulation would be. And if it is not an objective standard process, we don't feel it is warranted to use it. Hopefully that insulation question sounds straightforward, but in fact is very core to assessing existing homes. I'll over to you, David, because you've probably been reading the next few questions while I was answering that one.
David, there's lots and lots of questions coming in. So if you're both available just to stay online for a little bit to keep answering questions, that would be great. And I'll just remind everyone that there is another webinar on the 16th of March, which will go into a bit more detail. So thank you very much that's a lot of great information, and it's obviously a lot of interest. I am going to move on to our second presentation, and so keep the questions coming for David and April. Our second presenter is Ian Bassett, who is the Director of Policy and Professional Development at BDAA. Ian's going to be presenting the New South Wales Design and Building Practitioners Bill and Regulations of 2020 and the impact this will have on building in New South Wales. It's essential that building designers working on Class 2 or projects containing Class 2 buildings understand and prepare for the new legislation, which significantly modifies the process of design practice with regard to these projects. So we're going to open up the discussion so you can have all of your questions answered. Have I got you online, Ian? Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Lovely. I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Welcome all. I've been asked to talk about the New South Wales Design and Building Practitioners Bill and Regulations and where we are actually at the moment. There's a lot of talk about, and erroneous talk about, what it is, what it isn't, what's going to impact, what have I got to do, where do I go, etc., etc. So I just want to give a brief overview. It's probably a little bit more than a brief overview, but an overview. So the BDA prepared submissions on the draft regulations and regulatory impact statement, and these can be found in the members area of the BDA website. There are many reporting, lodging and compliance requirements within the draft regulations. However, this briefing is to highlight the pertinent content of draft regulations that have an impact on the registration of building designers. Once the final regulations are issued, and hopefully in March, April, BDAA will arrange for instructive webinars to provide you up to date with formal implementation of the regulations. At this stage, we just don't know what that process is at the moment. In the meantime, we can provide you the following summary. Excuse me. What type of building works do the regulations apply to? There's a lot of confusion about this, but simply the first round of regulations will apply only to Class 2 buildings and other classes that incorporate a Class 2 element within the design. And under the NCC definitions, a Class 2 building is a building containing 2 or more sole occupancy units, each being a separate dwelling. The main aim of the regulations at the moment is to pick up the multi-storey Class 2 buildings. Classes 1 and 10 and 3 to 9 are not covered by these regulations, except for those that have a Class 2 element into the design. We believe that these classes will be added later into the regulations, but initially the government is concentrating all of its efforts into the Class 2 realm. Building designers need to be aware, however, that buildings covered by the low-rise medium density compliant development code may be Class 2 structures. You could have 2 townhouses with an underground car park. That is a Class 2 structure. This would require registration as a building designer or an architect to work on these types of development. So the registration, the draft registration that proposes there will be 2 classes of registration for building designers, and this is where it's interesting for us. Number 1 is design practitioner, building design restricted low-rise. The word restricted may be removed. We've put our argument in the government saying that's not a nice thing to say about building designers, but we'll see what happens. So low-rise may design a Class 2 building or a building containing a Class 2 part as a maximum gross floor area of no more than 2,000 metres squared, but does not include a building that's Type A or Type B construction. Now, I'll make a point here that these are draft regulations. The BDAA has opposed the exclusion of a Type B construction, as many Class 2 buildings are actually Type B. Manor houses, townhouses built over an underground car park. As soon as a Class 2 building is 2 stories, it's Type B construction. Design practitioner, building design restricted, excuse me, medium rise, may design the following classes of building, but does not include a building that's type A for the purposes of a class 4, 5, 6, 7A and 8 building. Class 2 building or a building containing a class 2 part that has a rise in stories of no more than 3. And for a building that has a 1-story classified as a 7A building, generally a car park, a class 2 building or a building containing a class 2 part that has a rise in stories of no more than 4. So that would allow you a ground level car park. These classifications follow closely those of the National Regulation Framework being promulgated by the Australian Building Codes Board. At the moment, there's no open classification has not been proposed at this stage, due to the fact that multi-storey class 2 buildings generally fall under the provisions of SEP 65, and these types of buildings must be designed under the direction of an architect. The BDAA is confident that an open category will be introduced once the other classes of building types are included in the regulations. The other classification is for a principal design practitioner general. The principal design practitioners are authorised to do the following: coordinate the provision of design compliance declarations by suitably authorised registered design practitioners for regulated designs prepared for building work, and make a principal compliance declaration in relation to matters referred to in paragraph A and a design compliance declaration of those matters. The issue the BDAA has with this classification is the draft regulations, and I say the word draft again, precludes building designers being registered for this classification. The BDAA has made submissions to the government to have this anomaly rectified, as to put this restriction on building designers is clearly and totally impractical, as it would mean that the building designer would have to engage the services of a principal design practitioner, and in the building design theatre, this would normally mean a registered design practitioner architect, to manage the processes and functions required of the principal design practitioner. Architects in general will be against entering into such arrangements with building designers, especially considering that the projects that they will be managing are not of their own design. We argue if building designers are being registered to undertake class 2 buildings, then they must be allowed to undertake the full range of functions associated with those designs. To do otherwise will be a clear restraint of trade unless there's competition of the current market. Let's get now a look at the qualifications, experience, knowledge and skills. The draft regulations list the following for the building design classifications. Qualifications: must have for a design practitioner in the class of design practitioner building design who carries out work or carry out work of a low-rise building, an NRV and MVR, that's National Vocational Regulated Approved Diploma in Building Design or Architectural Drafting. For a design practitioner who's going to be working on medium-rise buildings, an approved associate degree or advanced diploma in building design or architectural design. Knowledge: must know and understand the following: the Act and the regulation, the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including regulations under that Act, the Building Code of Australia and the NCC, include volumes 1 and 2, including documents adopted by reference in the Building Code of Australia. And building design, including methods, materials and planning to the extent that this knowledge is relevant to this class of registration. The Act or the regulations ask for skills to interpret and assess compliance with the relevant requirements of the Building Code of Australia and assess compliance with relevant standards relating to design of building, including materials, finishings, fittings, components, etc., to the extent that the standards are relevant. Now, the BDAA has questioned the government on the term must have in relation to the following qualifications: low-rise diploma of building design, medium-rise advanced diploma of building design. And I'll emphasise those words, must have. The BDAA agrees generally with the basic requirement of these qualifications, but considers an alternative pathway for registration must be provided to cater for those who do not hold a formal qualification, but who have many years of experience. The skill sets and competence to undertake this level of design work. Also, given that the Advanced Diploma of Building Design has only just been approved for introduction into the VENT training system for 2021, it's highly unlikely that anyone would actually have this qualification, thus making an alternative pathway even more relevant. It should also be considered in the draft regulations that the mutual recognition of qualification between other states and territories be recognised, And those building design practitioners that are registered in their own jurisdiction be allowed to practice in New South Wales under the same licensing criteria. And each state has different levels of licensing criteria. For experience, the draft regulations prescribe that all classes of design practitioners must have a minimum of 5 years recent practical experience. The BDAA accreditation program, and many of you have undergone the accreditation program, which of course is required to undertake projects that come under the New South Wales Low-Rise Medium Diversity Compliant Development Code. The BDAA is currently working closely with the New South Wales Government in having the program accepted as a pathway to registration under the new regulations. The BDAA accreditation program is based on the National Building Design Training Package endorsed under the VET training scheme and the Australian Industry Skills Council. The Australian Building Codes Board is also using the National Training Package for its National Regulation Framework criteria. The accreditation program already has endorsement by New South Wales State Planning, and we're confident it will be also endorsed under Design and Building Practitioners regulations. The BDAA has proposed to the government that our accreditation program be recognised as a registration scheme, similar to that being granted to the engineering bodies. At this point of time, we're still in negotiations with the government on this matter, and we'll keep you informed as the situation evolves. CPD. The draft regulations for CBDA are a prescribed practitioner must each year successfully complete at least 3 hours of relevant education and training as approved by the Secretary in the guidelines. In our submission to the government, the BDAA deemed that the requirement of 3 hours of CPD is too low for all design practitioners, and compare this to the minimum hours required for registration of an architect, 10 hours formal, 10 hours informal, and BDAA membership and accreditation requires 25 points. That's equivalent to approximately 20 hours. The 3 hours that the government is talking about, the minimum of 3 hours, is 3 hours related to the NCC and the BCA. And we're still having talks with the government on how we can incorporate that into our system. Next one on the list was professional indemnity insurance, PII. The draft regulations for PII require that each individual design practitioner set their own level of PII. The BDAA is concerned that this could lead to design practitioners being underinsured, and the AIA has also expressed concerns with this proposal. In our submission to the government, the BDAA proposed that the minimum level of assurance be set for each class of registration, rather than leaving it up to each individual registered designer to set their own level. And our accreditation program sets the minimum levels for low rise as 2 million, medium rise 5, and open at 10. These minimum levels have been readily acceptable by accredited building designers. We've also put forward an alternative that could be set a base PII level for each class and allow additional PII to be taken for those projects which value exceeds the base level of the PII. Insurance bodies would need to be a party to such a scheme, but it would allow better consumer protection overburdening smaller design practices. So as a summary, as stated in the introduction, there are many reporting, lodging, compliance requirements within the draft regulations, and we'll endeavour to provide instructive webinars in due course to allow you to make an informed decision on whether or not you need to be registered under the proposed Class 2 registration scheme. We believe that eventually all New South Wales building designers will be required to be registered to undertake designs for all classes of building, but for the moment, it's only for Class 2 buildings that are under the spotlight. The other classes will probably come in, I would imagine, in 2022. So for the time being, you can continue designing those wonderful Class 1 and 10 and commercial industrial buildings that building designers are renowned for. So that sort of puts it in a summary of where it's actually at, and I hope that that sort of clears the air, but I'm certainly open for anyone that has questions. Feel free to ask them. Deafening silence was the answer.
Hi, and there is a question from Benita Elliott saying, are there any changes being proposed for the New South Wales qualification offering? I.e., as far as I'm aware, New South Wales is not currently offering an advanced diploma of building design, only the diploma of building design.
The the TAFE courses and the RTO people are looking at that at the moment. The Diploma of Building Design, the original or the existing Diploma of Building Design that's been running for several years, has been given a 2.5-year extension of time so people can complete it before the new one actually kicks in. There is a new diploma, they're pretty close to the same. So for those people who are doing a Diploma of Building Design or have done a Diploma of Building Design, there's no issue there. For the Advanced Diploma of Building Design, most of the colleges are only now starting to look at it because, as I said before, it was only introduced basically in January this year where it got the final tick. So no college has actually set this up. I know that the Teresa Serraro, who runs the online RTO course in building design, is certainly looking at the advanced diploma. But this is why we're very clear with the government that we must have an alternative pathway for registration for those who would not have that advanced diploma. Or in a lot of cases, you would have an advanced diploma of architectural technology, not an advanced diploma of building design. When the regulation says it must have, it's black and white, there's no room for movement. In our talks with the government about a week ago, they did concede that needs to be softened, and they're certainly going to be looking at that for us.
Thank you. Andre has asked, will the Advanced Bachelor of Building Design or the Bachelor of Building Design offered by the Central Queensland University be recognised? We
believe that the advanced Diploma of Building Design would be, or the associate degree at Central. I think Central Queensland University is the only one that runs an associate degree. That would be acceptable. It comes back, as I mentioned before, about cross-border recognition of courses, and that's something that the government is looking at now, and we did raise that question with them.
Okay. George has asked, if you are accredited for medium, are you also accredited for low-rise automatically?
Automatically. If you're accredited for medium, it covers the low-rise categories as well.
Okay. Nick wants to know how you keep your moustache so neat. And Michael has said, just to confirm, current accreditation does not equal registration. So that's that.
Our current accreditation, we cannot guarantee at this stage that it will be a pathway. I hate saying that, but it's true. But our talks with the government indicate it will be a pathway. But I was saying, I say this to lots of people ask the same question. What the government says to you one day may not necessarily happen the next day. And I think everyone can understand that. But at this stage, because our accreditation program already has New South Wales State Planning Assessment and it's already in the EPA Act, we can't see any reason why it wouldn't be accepted as a pathway.
Okay. Corey has said, I'm about to submit my medium-rise BDAA registration, but have not done the advanced diploma. Should I just do the low-rise accreditation as it won't be recognised?
I think it comes to when we do our accreditation, we set up a standard of the advanced diploma or assessed equivalent. And for those who want to go, and if they have the experience, we have 2 levels of assessment. We have assessment type A, is those people who have a qualification and experience. And we have an assessment type B for those who don't have a qualification but have experience, a little bit more experience. Under the assessment, that would come under assessment type B, and she would have to prepare or submit 3 sets of documents rather than 2 sets of documents. And that's really the only difference. And it'll be assessed on that basis. And also there's a higher level of experience. So if you can satisfy those requirements of the experience level and the types of projects, yes, we would take that as an assessment.
Okay. Brian has asked, do you need to be registered to carry out internal renovations only within an apartment in a Class 2 building?
Generally, no. This was raised several times in the SEP 65 issues because they're multi-storey buildings, and SEP 65, for those from other states who aren't sure what that means, it comes under Class 2 buildings in New South Wales that are 3 or more stories high and contain 4 or more units. Those projects are restricted to, must be done under the direction of an architect. If it's an internal fit out, there's no real problem. if it was to be major structural changes, that could trigger it, but that would have to be, you'd have to have a look at that. Structural changes could affect the apartments above you. I mean, if you want to knock out a wall between a bedroom and a living room, the rest of the building may fall down on top of you. So that could come into it. So it's not simply say yes or no, but certainly generally internal fit outs and renovations aren't a problem.
Okay. Joanne says, I've finished my diploma of building design in December. I feel like I'm under pressure to ensure I stay relevant until this is introduced. What should I be doing to ensure I don't get tangled up, so to speak?
So just to repeat that one again, I just want to get it.
So Joanne finished her diploma of building design in December.
Right.
Feel like she needs to stay relevant until the changes are introduced and wants to know what she should be doing.
Well, what she should be doing would be trying to be working in the industry and getting that experience under her belt. To be registered under for the class 2 buildings, there's a minimum 5 years experience. So you've got to get that experience under your belt, and that's not necessarily a simple thing to do, but it's getting there. At the moment, there's no restrictions on what anyone can do at the moment. In fact, in New South Wales, you don't have to be registered for anything, except if you're doing the low-rise compliant development code. Yes, you then have to be accredited by the BDAA, or if you're doing childcare centres, you have to be accredited by the BDAA. And that's in place at the moment. It's been in there for some time, and nothing's going to alter that at the moment. So I think for people who have just completed their diploma, the main aim is to get experience under your belt, get that time factor set up so you can then go and apply for registration in due course.
Okay, Rodney has asked when it's all planned to start.
The 1st of July. This all comes in on the 1st of July. We've been promised we will get the regulations probably in the last week of March or the first week of April. Once we have those in our hand, we'll certainly get more information out to members.
Okay. There's a couple of comments about the advanced diploma. So Vanessa has said she's from the Built Form Design Academy and they will be offering both the advanced diploma and the graduate diploma.
Yep. That's what I mentioned before, Teresa Serraro. That's her. Well, I should have mentioned the name of the group. I apologise for that. Free plug there. That's fine. But yes, it's because of the diploma's been extended for another 2.5 years. There's no rush to get the new diploma in place. And I know that the Built Form Design Academy is looking at the higher levels, and then in due course they will change over to the lower diploma level as well. But there's a lot of people who have done a diploma who want to go and get that higher qualification, and this is a good opportunity for that.
Okay. Louise has asked what happens to designs we have in hand now for class 2 buildings.
I won't say throw them in the garbage. No. If you get your plans drawn up and for your client, and remember this is for class 2 buildings only. We've got to keep remembering that if they are approved for construction before the 1st of July, the new rules will not apply to them. So get your act together and get your construction certificate before the 1st of July.
Alfonso has said, as it stands, the existing BDAA accreditation system will not be recognised.
At the moment, it's a voluntary one and it's recognised under the Compliant Development Code for low-rise medium density and for childcare centres. We are talking with the government of having it accepted as a pathway for registration, and those discussions are going pretty well. In fact, I think our last meeting we had with them about a week ago, they were conceding, yes, it will be a pathway, but we've still got to do some work with them. They've asked us to meet up again with them shortly, because what we have to do is make sure that what we're doing in our accreditation program aligns with the registration process as well. So there might be a bit of tweaking on both sides to get it all lined up. But in general terms, we're fairly confident, yes, it will be a pathway. But the reality is the government doesn't have any other way of doing it. So they're going to have to work with industry, and that was always the aim of it.
Okay. Elia has said, I am currently an experienced graduate architect, completed a Master of Architecture 6 years ago, and I'm a full member of the BDAA for low-rise residential. I do a lot of projects under the low-rise development code. Is there anything I need to do for the time being to continue doing the work I am doing?
No, nothing at all, really. I think what she's done is she's on the low rise, and she could always go up to a medium rise, but that really looks at what the projects that she's going to be involved in. If what she's got at the moment satisfies all those projects she's working on, there's nothing that needs to be done at this stage. It's just that when, from the 1st of July, when these regulations come in, if you are going to be working on Class 2 buildings, you will have to be registered with the government. And that is a separate registration to the accreditation program. It's the same. I'm a registered architect with the ARB here in New South Wales. I will have to get a separate registration with the government to be an architect under the new regulations. I think it's a little about grabbing extra money, quite frankly.
Brian has said, does a UK-based Bachelor of Science degree in Architectural Technology meet the requirements for registration?
Oh, that's a good one. In Australia, it's very difficult for overseas people who have architectural qualifications to be registered as architects in Australia. They do make it very difficult. Under our accreditation program, we do recognise overseas qualifications, but at the same time that the projects that are put forward to us for assessment must be ones that they've prepared in Australia under Australian conditions. We do accreditation for people from all over the place: Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Peru, Brazil, England, you name it, we've done it, China, and we do accept that because why wouldn't you? But as I said, the projects they put forward for accreditation need to be projects prepared in Australia under Australian conditions.
Okay. Rodney has asked, will these documents for Class 2 be part of the Commissioner's job, and detail is essential?
Yeah, under the new rules, and that's why I didn't want to get too involved in what the requirements are and the paperwork that's going to be required, but it's certainly going to be quite high. There's going to be quite a big difference in the level of documentation that you have to do. Without sort of bogging you down with too much detail, you will get a development approval, you get a construction certificate, but that's not what you build the building from. You then have to put all your designs together with all the sub-consultants, electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, structural, civil. They all get put together and they're registered with the government as regulated designs. And those regulated designs are the ones that the builder builds from, and they're the ones that get audited when eventually you apply for an occupation certificate. And if variations go through, you have to lodge it through and make sure that it's kept up to date. So it's quite a complex process, and I didn't want to get bogged down in it too much today. But and the reason being is because until we've seen the final regulations, we don't know what they're going to be, because a lot of our submissions with us and the AIA particularly, and engineers, have virtually been going in and say, look, this is probably could be a bit too much, or we need changes to that, or we'd like to see this tweaked or that tweaked. And what we're trying to do is get it so that everybody's on the same page.
Mark has said, assuming a Class 2 building is approved by the 1st of July, do you still have to register the building on the portal for the construction phase?
No. Anything approved before the 1st of July comes under the current system.
Okay. Faisal has asked, why we BDAA members who are not registered under NDIS scheme for SDA home assessments?
Can't answer that one.
Questions about.
Sorry.
Yes. That is all the questions at this stage, Ian.
Fine. If anyone has a question or wants to put a query to it, they're free to contact me. My email address is policy@bdaa.com.au, or they can give me a phone call. If they go onto the website under accreditation, my phone number's there, and I'm quite happy to take any calls or to any inquiries.
Great. And SJ's just put the link for your email address in the chat box too.
That's a worry now. No, I'm in trouble.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Pleasure.
Wrap the meeting up now because that brings us up to 2 o'clock. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to our presenters. There's a lot of really useful information that's come out of today's session. So the next online chapter meeting will be on Tuesday, the 6th of April at 1 p.m. So keep an eye out for the registration email, and there is a QR code on the screen now for your CPD point. So thanks for joining us. I'll see you in April. Bye.